All right, everybody, we are back this week for UFC Edmonton. Moreno versus Albazi, which takes place at Rogers Place in Edmonton, Canada. In the main event of the evening, you have a banger in the flyweight division between top 3 ranked contenders in the number 2 ranked former multiple-time flyweight champion in Brandon, the Assassin Baby Moreno, taking on the number 3 ranked, returning off of an injury, Amir the Prince Albazi. And then in the co-main event of the evening, you have a battle in the women's flyweight division. A battle of 125ers for the co and the main event. You have the number 3 ranked Aaron Cold-Blooded Blanchfield taking on the number 5 ranked former UFC strawweight champion and current flyweight contender on the cusp of a title shot in Thug Rose Namajunas. So without any further ado, let's get this started and step into the ring. So again, like we do every week, we're not going to break down every fight on the card. That's not something we normally do. We do pick the best fights on the card and go from there. We do break down a heavy majority, but there are a couple we're going to be skipping for today's breakdown. But, UFC 308 was crazy. We called the 3rd round knockout for Ilia Topuria. We went 9-2 on the YouTube picks and then went 11-2 overall on picks. So really good picking night. Could have been an amazing night in terms of the betting if I just switched a couple things out with the way I had them paired up in some parlays. I mean, we had Shara KO 2-3, Ilia KO 2-3-4, Hamzat inside the distance, just crazy stuff. But sometimes you just gotta change up your game plan and do things a little bit different. So we'll be back, but picks were on fire, so we're looking to keep that momentum rolling into this week. If you go back and listen to the breakdown on the Topuria fight, I mean, I pretty much broke that fight down exactly how it played out. I mean, I said the KO was probably going to happen close to the fence. He was going to move in and be close enough and close that gap that Gaethje couldn't close, and that's pretty much exactly what happened. I don't see anybody at 145 beating Topuria. I do think Lopez, just because of how wild he is, he might be able to make some things happen, but I really don't think he wins. And it's crazy because the 2 people I had for tickets to be the featherweight champion at the end of the year were Ilia Topuria, so we're going to cash that ticket. I think I got it at plus 250 on DraftKings, but I also had Diego Lopez at 76-1. To be the featherweight champion at the end of the year. And he was the backup fighter for this card. So although we didn't hit that, I'm pretty proud of having that ticket, like a year in advance. Before Lopez beat Ortega, before the Ortega fight was even made, we had that ticket. So I'm glad that we got that. And we did have the ticket on Topuria before he fought Volkanovski for the title. But yeah, man, I don't see anybody really beating Topuria. He's got the best boxing in the UFC right now, and I think he's probably the most well-rounded featherweight in the division, one of the most well-rounded fighters on the roster. Hamzat Chimaev did what we thought he could do, but we didn't think he would be able to do against Robert Whittaker and take him down, get on the back, and break his jaw pretty much, break the bottom teeth in with that face crank, just showing you how strong he is. I've been a big proponent of Dricus du Plessis, and I do have that ticket as well at plus 500 for him to end the year as the champion, and that's going to cash for us. But I originally was like, I don't think Hamzat would beat Dricus. Now I'm not so sure, man. I think the 2 people who have the best chance of beating du Plessis would be Hamzat Chimaev and Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. I think those 2 fighters have the best chance of beating a guy like Dricus. I don't think Dricus is going to end the year as the champion. Maybe I'm wrong. I've never picked against Topuria. I've never picked against du Plessis, and they've both proven me right every single time. But we might have to hop off the du Plessis train in 2025. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. But yeah, let's get into this card. I could spend a lot of time talking about the card from this past weekend, but we're not going to. Let's get into the first fight in the bantamweight division between Chad Anheliger taking on Cody Gibson. Anheliger came in and beat Charlampos Gregorio, and that was a fight where a lot of people thought that coming off the Contender Series, Gregorio was going to be able to kind of piece up Anheliger and probably get a highlight finish, just like he got against Cameron Smotherman, which that looks like a pretty good win still. But Gregorio hasn't had a successful UFC career. And I think Anheliger has decent striking. He switches stances pretty well. He finishes his combinations with kicks. He throws some good jabs. And, I think the striking on the feet will probably be competitive. But I think as an overall fighter, Cody Gibson is going to find a way to finish Anheliger. Would I be surprised if it goes the distance? No, because, with the new gloves and everything, fights can go to decision. But I did see Anheliger get submitted in the third round against Jose Johnson. And Johnson's a very long, lanky fighter, so he's able to kind of find submission attempts quicker than the average flyweight, or the quicker than the average bantamweight, I'm sorry. And Gibson is still a long, tall, rangy guy. He's going to have a 4-inch height advantage against Anheliger, and with those long limbs, he might be able to lock up a Darce choke. He might be able to lock up an Anaconda choke. And, he did get an early submission over Brian Kelleher. He went back and forth in one of the best tough finales in a long time against Brad Katona. And I think Gibson's just a better fighter. I think he's better on the ground. I think he's better at range on the feet. I think he's going to have more pop in his shots than Anheliger. And I think he's going to be able to put better combinations together. And if Anheliger tries to panic wrestle to kind of cut the pressure off on the feet, he's going to be able to grab his neck. He's going to be able to lock up submissions. And, of course, if he's on top of Anheliger, Gibson is going to have to watch out for arm bars, watch out for sweeps, because, Anheliger will try to use sweeps and work his way back up to the feet. But I think this is a bad matchup for Anheliger, and I think Gibson will find a way to get a finish. I'm going to go with a TKO, though. I think, well, no, you know what? I'll go with submission. I'll say he rocks Anheliger. Anheliger shoots a bad shot, and he gets locked up in a Darce choke or a ninja choke, and Gibson gets the tap. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if it goes to a decision. So give me Cody Gibson for the first breakdown. I'll go Gibson, second round ninja choke submission. I think he'll catch his neck, being the long and rangy guy he is, and find a way to submit him. But if it was a TKO, it would not surprise me, because Gibson's striking is pretty good. He has pop on his shots. He's technical. He's clean. And he puts things together, and he's going to be much taller and longer. So wouldn't be surprised if it's a TKO, but I think Gibson gets it done inside the distance. Give me Cody Gibson via second round ninja choke submission. All right, next up is one of my favorite fights on the card. In the bantamweight division, you have the returning Sidey taking on Garrett Armfield. I like both of these guys, man. I faded Sidey against Tavares as an underdog. And coincidentally, on the same card, I faded Katona as a favorite and took the underdog in Garrett Armfield. So, I had a good night on that card overall. But in this fight, man, I think it's going to be competitive. Both of these guys are very well-rounded mixed martial artists. They both are very good strikers. I would say that the length and range of Sidey is what's going to give Armfield the most problems. I think that at distance, the jab, the 1-2, the left hook to the right hand, switching stances and cutting off the opponent, I think Sidey manages his distance and range a lot better than a guy like Armfield. But Armfield, being a shorter guy, can kind of work his way on the inside and throw big bombs. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of a Ramon Tavares. Tavares isn't the longest and rangiest guy, but he uses a lot of slips, a lot of rolls, a lot of head movement, and can roll his way in and counter you with that right hook. Rolling, counter right hook, overhand left. Catch you with a big overhand. Catch you with an uppercut and hook on the way out. And in this fight, I think it's pretty similar, man. I think Armfield is a little bit more technical than a guy like Tavares. He uses a good high guard. He moves his way into range, uses a good jab. He's got good eyes, good footwork, good movement. But I really think that the cardio down the stretch from Sidey, paired with his use of his range and distance, is what's going to give Armfield the most problems. Could I see anybody wrestling in this fight? Yeah, I think if anybody uses wrestling, it's going to be Armfield. Going to try to look for takedowns and maybe try to control Sidey on the mat. We did see him get into some good positions against Brady Heastand and was able to throw up an armbar, put him in another submission, almost got it, but didn't quite get it. But he was outmatched on the ground with Brady Heastand overall. But on the feet, he dropped Heastand in the second round. Looked like he was going to get that second round TKO. And he's got really heavy hands. His power is not to be messed with. A lot of people thought that maybe just because it was Toshiomi Kazama, who really can't take a punch, that maybe it was overrated, but he was cracking Brad Katona. He showcased good takedown defense. I think Sidey has good enough takedown defense to defend most of the attempts that probably would come from the Armfield side, because I don't necessarily see Sidey looking for takedowns in this matchup too much. But I think down the stretch, in the midpoint of the second round and on, the cardio and the pace and pressure of Sidey is going to kind of put Armfield under pressure, and it's going to slow Armfield down a lot. I think Armfield could catch Sidey with a big shot. I think he could crack him, he could drop him, he could knock him out, but that's not necessarily how I see it going. And I really think that's what it comes down to. I think it's the bigger power in a guy like Armfield, where he might crack him with a big shot and rock Sidey. He might drop Sidey. We've seen him get knocked out on the Contender Series. We've seen Tavares hurt him and kind of sit him in the chair. And he is there to be hit. I think the biggest weapon against a guy like Sidey is straight shots down the middle. He can kind of move his head off the center line, but he seems to avoid looping shots like hooks and uppercuts better than straight punches. So I think if I'm Armfield, I'm using the jab, I'm feinting the jab, and I'm trying to fire that cross down the middle. I'm trying to throw 1-2s down the middle to catch Sidey, but being that he is a longer and taller fighter, it's going to be a little bit harder for Armfield to get into range, but he's used to fighting taller guys. He is a shorter guy for this division. That's why he kind of fights in that squat down, lowered to the ground, a grounded stance. But I think the length and reach of Sidey, the volume of Sidey, and most importantly, I think the output in cardio, like I said, in the midpoint of the second and into the third round, is going to just kind of break Garrett Armfield. Armfield always tends to slow down towards the end of the second round, slow down towards the end of the third round. And he's even said it himself. He has like that mental hurdle where he'll start to slow down like in the last 2 minutes of the round, last minute and a half of the round. And I think Sidey might be able to put enough pace and pressure on him, might be able to push him against the cage enough and be able to unload with very clean and crisp striking combinations. I mean, elbows, uppercuts, 1-2s, catching the exits with head kicks. And I think Sidey's actually going to put away Garrett Armfield. It pains me to say it because I like Armfield a lot. But I think Sidey's very good as well. I think both of these guys are extremely technical, and this is probably going to be one of the fights of the night. But I think Sidey is going to hurt Garrett Armfield in the third round and put him down. I think he's going to just put a pace on him that Armfield's cardio isn't going to be able to keep up with. So I'm going to take Serhi Sidey to win via third-round TKO against Garrett Armfield. I like him in this matchup. I do have him in a parlay. So, full transparency here. But I think Sidey has the tools, the length, the reach, the combinations, the cardio, and the output to put away Garrett Armfield and not allow him to rest in those situations where he gets tired like he was able to against Katona at some point. So give me Serhi Sidey, third-round TKO against Garrett Armfield. Next fight up is in the featherweight division. You have a really solid matchup here between the Moroccan Devil and Youssef Zalal taking on Jack Tank Shore. 17-2 for Jack Shore, 15-5-1 on the side of Youssef Zalal. I like this fight a lot, but I think Youssef Zalal is going to roll here. I picked him against Jarno Aarons, and he got that submission pretty early, first-round submission. And I thought that fight had the opportunity to go to decision, but Zalal just found a way to get that finish. He comes in on short notice against Billy Q and is just kind of piecing up Billy Q on the feet, lands a knee up the middle that rocks him, finds a way to take his back and lock up a rear naked choke. Zalal is one of the only guys to go to decision aside from Josh Emmett with the current featherweight champion in Ilia Topuria. So I really think that does really put a feather in his cap, because not a lot of people are even able to make it outside the distance with Ilia Topuria. And yes, it was an early career Ilia Topuria in the UFC, but he still made it a competitive fight. We knew that Topuria won that fight. He used his wrestling and grappling more in that fight than almost any other fight he's had inside the UFC, but he still made it competitive at certain points, and Zalal was able to stay in there and avoid a lot of submission attempts. I think Jack Shore is decent. He has a good jab. He moves forward pretty well. He has really good top pressure and really good control, but I don't think he's going to be able to control a guy like Youssef Zalal. I think even if he gets takedowns, Zalal will be able to sweep or scramble his way back up to the feet. And I think he has much better range management than a guy like Jack Shore when it comes to the striking on the feet. And I think he'll probably be able to use his jab, use that hands low style, shoulder roll, Philly shell, get out of the way, and use his range and distance to kind of walk Jack Shore into some shots. Do I think this fight's going to be competitive? Yes. But I think Youssef Zalal is just a little bit better than Jack Shore on the feet and in terms of the grappling and jiu-jitsu aspects of mixed martial arts. There's not an area in this fight where I think Zalal is outmatched. I think it would be a problem if Zalal got put in the full mount against Jack Shore, but we did see Ricky Simón hurt Jack Shore multiple times and then lock up an anaconda choke and submit him. Or not an anaconda choke, I'm sorry, an arm triangle and get a submission there. Then we did back Ricky Simón as an underdog in that spot. We backed Joe Anderson Brito against Jack Shore. I feel like we have a pretty good read on Jack Shore. We picked him against Makwan Amirkhani to get a finish inside the distance. So I feel like I have a pretty good read. And yes, I do think this fight is going to be competitive. I think the striking exchanges will be competitive. But I think the overall volume, the defensive responsibility of Zalal, and the fact that he's going to be able to withstand those scrambles and probably work his way back up to the feet or find a top position, maybe even grab his neck in a choke, I think he'll be able to defend the pathways to victory for Jack Shore. And I think Zalal's going to get the job done here. I'm going to go Youssef Zalal via a... I could see a submission and I could see it go into a decision. I'll go submission. I think he'll finish Jack Shore. Usually if Jack Shore's losing, even though he's only lost twice, it is by finish in both of those. Even though he didn't quit against Joe Anderson Brito, but he was getting the break speed off of him. Give me Youssef Zalal by submission. I'll go submission again. Give me round 2 guillotine choke submission for Youssef Zalal. I think he'll catch his neck shooting on a bad takedown and lock it up. It's either going to be a guillotine or potentially an anaconda choke. So give me a guillotine, second round guillotine choke for the Moroccan Devil and Youssef Zalal over Jack Tank Shore. All right, next fight up is in the bantamweight division. You have the former featherweight in Charles Jourdain taking on Victor La Mangosta Henry. 24-6 for Henry, 15-8-1 for Charles Jourdain. Listen, I think Jourdain is a solid guy technically. He's a southpaw. He uses a good left kick to the body, left kick to the head, good check right hook, good 1-2s down the middle. He seems to move very well. But I don't know what it is about Jourdain. It's just sometimes he'll be able to catch your neck and lock you up in a submission. And then sometimes they give him fights where he's able to look very good. And yes, this isn't his hometown, so he might come in with a little bit of extra vigor. And he might come in really looking to put a stamp on this win. And I think Jourdain being in Canada and this being his first time at 35, he's going to be more, well-sized for the weight class. He's not going to be at a size disadvantage or size discrepancy. He's going to actually have a 2-inch height advantage in this fight and a 1-inch reach advantage. And that's not something that Jourdain is used to. And he does have a lot of output. He does have a lot of... I guess he's very active. Even at 45, he was very active. He's coming off that knockout loss to Gene Silva. Was kind of getting pieced up for the majority of that fight. Then went in for a takedown, got framed off on, and got hit with an uppercut, and said that sent his head into the clouds and got finished. We've never seen Jourdain get knocked out before, but that time he did. He did get submitted at a certain point by Julian Juicy J. Erosa. I think Victor Henry is a little bit more technical. And I think he's just a more well-rounded fighter than a guy like Jourdain. If you look at the age discrepancy here, it's not listed on the website, but I believe Victor Henry to be the older fighter. But I think he's very clean. He's very technical. He's a very smart guy. And I don't necessarily see Jourdain using a heavy wrestling approach to kind of slow down the striking output and the movement and the overall just output of a guy like Victor Henry. I think the fighter who has higher output overall is Jourdain, but he just tends to make bad decisions in terms of his fight IQ. Jourdain is never a guy that at this point I could trust in picking on this podcast. I couldn't. And I've picked him before, and it's come back to bite me. But I don't think he's a bad fighter. I think he's technically well-rounded. I think he's sharp on the feet. Like I said, very good kicks to the body, very good kicks to the head. But he just makes bad decisions, and he's not the best defensive fighter. And we've seen him lose by knockout. We've seen him lose by submission. We've seen him make mistakes where he was ahead in fights and then just cost himself the fight. And I have more faith in Victor Henry to be able to put a solid game plan together with his coach Josh Barnett in his corner. I think he's going to move a lot. That's going to confuse Jourdain. I think the longer, rangier punches are going to come from Henry. Not that I'm saying he's technically the longer fighter, but I think he uses his length and reach better than a guy like Jourdain. And Jourdain's going to pressure. He's going to get on that front foot. He's going to try to throw them big overhands. He's going to try to throw that big hook. He's going to try to rip those kicks to the body. Everything that Jourdain throws is mean. It's mean. He puts a lot of power into it. And I think that's going to make the counter game of Victor Henry more apparent in this fight. It's going to make it easier for him to find counters. It's going to make it easier for him to find shots on a guy like Jourdain. I don't think Jourdain's going to quit, but I do think he's just going to get outpointed for the majority of this fight. And even in dropping a weight class, how does that affect his body? We've seen people do it very successfully, but more times than not, when they drop down a weight class, it doesn't go as planned. And coming off that vicious knockout, the first knockout loss of your career, did that kind of scare you into drop and help you in making that decision to drop down? Like, oh, these guys hit too hard, but we don't know what you're going to be like coming off that KO loss. Is he going to be tentative? Is he going to be more gun shy than his previous fights because he's never been knocked out before, at least inside the UFC? So I think the range, the distance control, the footwork, the combinations, punctuating the combinations with kicks from Victor Henry, the use of his jab, the 1-2, putting combinations together, I think he's just going to outpoint Jourdain. Now, Jourdain can win by making it nasty, by making it mean, by catching Henry on a takedown attempt in a guillotine. He's got a very good guillotine choke. We've seen him catch a few people in that before. But I think Victor Henry's going to win this fight by decision. I could even see a late TKO, like round 2, round 3 TKO for Henry. But I think he's going to outpoint Jourdain. I think he's going to outstrike him. I think he's going to counter him all night. And I think Jourdain's going to have some success. But I think overall the damage is going to be on the side of Henry. Jourdain's going to get caught coming in a lot. And I think he's going to win a decision in Victor Henry. So give me Victor La Mangosta Henry to defeat Charles Air Jourdain in his hometown via a 29-28 unanimous decision. Might be a split because they are in Canada, so they might want to give the hometown boy at least one scorecard. But I think Victor Henry wins 2 out of the 3 rounds, and I think he's just a better fighter compared to Charles Jourdain. So give me Victor Henry, 29-28 unanimous decision. Next up is a battle in the women's flyweight division between the Queen of Violence and Ariane Lipski taking on Jasmine Jasudavicius, or Jasudavicius, however you want to say it. Looking at this fight, I've backed Ariane Lipski against her last opponent. I can't think of her name off the top of my head. Oh, Casey O'Neill. I picked her there. I picked her to win by TKO. Of course, she almost TKOs her, and then she gets a submission. MMA's going to MMA. But in this fight against Jasudavicius, I feel like the wrestling and the forward pressure is going to be too much. On the feet, Ariane Lipski, or Ariane De Silva, she's going to win this fight. She's got the better striking, way better kicking game to the body, to the head, good 1-2s, and she will kind of piece up Jasudavicius on the feet. 100% she is going to have the better output. She's going to have the better striking. But the question is, can she hurt Jasudavicius enough to stop her from getting that forward pressure, getting on that forward pedal, pushing De Silva up against the cage and getting takedowns, and rinsing and repeating the forward pressure, takedowns, top control, go for submissions, land ground and pound. Will she be able to stop it? I don't think she will. I like Ariane Lipski. I like Ariane De Silva. I like her as an opponent, or I like her as a fighter. And I mean, she's pretty fucking hot. You can't lie. But looking at De Silva, like I said, she's going to have the better kickboxing on the feet. She's going to have the better kicks. She's going to punctuate her combinations better with kicks. She will throw more combinations. Jasudavicius does not have good defense on the feet. She does not have good defense. She will get hit. She will take a lot of shots. We've seen her get rocked before, but the thing is, she just doesn't stop coming forward. She likes to get in a fight. She likes to get into that dirty, messy, nasty fight. And we saw De Silva get taken down by Karine Silva. And she made that fight competitive at certain points. She survived a lot of the submission attempts. But the difference between Karine Silva and Jasudavicius is just the output on the ground, the forward pressure, and the activity. And I don't think Silva's going to be able to last with the forward pressure, the takedowns, the cage pushing, the ground and pound, the submission attempts. I don't think she's going to be able to last, man. Jasudavicius is a forward pressure monster. She doesn't stop coming forward. And yes, she can get hit. She can get hurt. We've seen her get rocked. We've seen her get wobbled. But that's not going to stop her. She doesn't care if she gets hit. And is that going to make her a championship-level fighter? I don't think so, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jasudavicius got to the top level of her division. I 100% would not be surprised. I think it's going to be a slow-cooking approach. I think Silva's going to have a good first round. I think she's going to hit Jasudavicius a lot. She might cut her, but I don't think she's going to finish her. And then I think Silva's going to get tired. She's going to get pushed back. She's going to get hit with some shots. She's going to get pushed against the fence. The takedowns are going to start coming easier and easier and easier and easier. And eventually, I think she's going to open up that ground and pound. I think she's going to give up her back, and I think she's going to get rear naked choked. Give me Jasudavicius to defeat Ariane Lipski or Ariane De Silva, the Queen of Violence, via a third-round rear naked choke submission. It wouldn't surprise me if it was round 2, but I think she'll get the sub in round 3. I like Jasudavicius to get that submission, to break her down, to beat her up. It could be a ground and pound TKO, but I think eventually the pressure, the takedowns, the wrestling, and the groundwork is going to be too much. So give me Jasudavicius, third round, rear naked choke submission against Ariane De Silva. I like both girls. This is going to be a good fight, but I got to side with the heavy pressure of Jasudavicius. All right, up next is going to be a battle in the bantamweight division between Amin Zahabi, who comes in at 11-2, taking on Pedro the Young Punisher Munhoz, who comes back with a record of 20-9, I believe. Let me see if I got that right. 20-9, yes. So this is a great fight. Great fight to cap off the prelims, and this is going to be competitive. This is going to be very competitive. Both of these guys are very technical in their approach, and they both have knockout power. I think the biggest weapon for Munhoz is going to be that bobbing and weaving and finishing his combinations with calf kicks. I think the stance of Zahabi, he's very grounded in his stance, but sometimes he stands a little too tall, and I think Munhoz might be able to chop that lead leg to bits. I would not be surprised if a jab and a low kick started this fight going downhill very early for Zahabi. But from what I've seen from Zahabi, this guy doesn't make bad decisions. He's not easy to take down. He's got good takedown defense. He can get hit with big shots, and we know Munhoz has a lot of power. Big overhand right to a left hook, big jab to a lead left hook. The best punch from him is going to be the overhand right and the left hook. On the side of Zahabi, he has a decent jab, but it's mainly going to be, again, big overhand rights, big left hooks. They're very similar. I just think Zahabi is a little bit technically sharper than Pedro Munhoz. He's a little bit better defensively, and Munhoz kind of takes some punches in order to start defending some punches. You know, and this kind of reminds me of the Chris Gutierrez fight. Both technical guys, and one has a big power advantage, except I know that Zahabi has more power than a guy like Gutierrez, and he has more output than a guy like Gutierrez, who kind of just switches stances, moves around, jabs and leg kicks for the majority of the fight. And I think that's going to make this a very close and competitive fight. I could see a knockout from Munhoz. He's got big power. We've seen Zahabi get knocked out before. I believe he got knocked out by Ricardo Ramos with a spinning elbow and got finished before. We saw him knock out Arichi Long with the overhand right and then stepped into that left hook and knocked him out. That's another combination that Pedro Munhoz is very, very familiar with. I think this fight's going to be competitive. I don't see a lot of takedowns. I don't see a lot of grappling. I don't see a lot of cage pushing. I think it's going to be a 15-minute kickboxing match. And I think that in this fight, being that it's in Canada, I'm going to take the underdog. I've picked against Munhoz before. I picked Kyler Phillips. That looked really good. I picked Chris Gutierrez, and it looked good until it didn't, and he got dropped. I could see a similar situation where Zahabi is outpointing him using that lead shoulder roll, Philly shell, catching and coming back with counters, outpointing him, and then gets hit with a big shot and dropped and loses the round. I could see a situation where that's how it plays out, but I'm going to take Zahabi. I think he's going to have more output. I think he's defensively responsible enough to be able to avoid the big shots of Munhoz. I think he's going to counter those low kicks with the straight right down the middle, the overhand right, coming back with the left hook, jab, left hook, jab his way out, moving on the outside, bop, 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 firing his combinations. I think it's going to be a competitive 15-minute kickboxing match, and being that it's in the hometown of the underdog in Zahabi, I'm going to take Zahabi to win this fight by decision. I don't think he's going to knock out Pedro Munhoz. I think eventually, just like Max Holloway, just like we talked about, eventually those guys who haven't been knocked out, eventually they get knocked out. And I think Zahabi has enough power to hurt Munhoz and potentially put him down, but I'm not going to bank on that. I think Zahabi outpoints Munhoz, lands the cleaner shots. I think it's probably a split decision, but I think overall Zahabi makes the better decisions, uses the better footwork and movement, lands the jabs, lands the left hooks, lands the overhands on the exits, catches Munhoz coming in, and outpoints him over 15 minutes. So give me Zahabi, the underdog, to win this fight, 29-28 unanimous decision. I think he wins 2 out of the 3 rounds and gets the win as the underdog. I don't know if he'll end on fight day as the underdog because it's basically a pick'em right now. But I'm going to take Zahabi to win by decision. 29-28 unanimous decision for Zahabi. I think he's just going to be a little bit cleaner than Munhoz. He's going to land the better shots, and I think he's better defensively in terms of his movement and his defense. So give me Zahabi to beat Munhoz by decision. All right, first fight up on the main card in the welterweight division. You have a battle between proper Mike Malott, who comes in 10-2-1, taking on Trevin Giles, who comes back at 16-6. Let me tell you this before I give you my prediction. I like Trevin Giles, man. I like the guy. I like his hands-low style. I like his boxing. And he was piecing up Carlos Prates at certain points. He was outlanding him. He was catching him with counters. He was pushing him back. Even against Dricus du Plessis, he rocked him. He pushed him back. He wobbled him. And then walked in and got knocked out. I think Giles is the better striker in terms of, defensively. I think he's the better defensive fighter on the feet. But he gets hit too much, and his chin is a big liability. And against a guy like Malott, coming off a loss where he was up the first 2 rounds, winning pretty decisively, and then just gassed out completely and got finished in the 3rd round by Neil Magny, I think they're giving him this fight to have him and allow him to make a statement. They want Malott to come into this fight against Giles and get an early finish, whether it's a knockout or whether it's a submission. I think he's got a big advantage in the grappling. I think he's got a big advantage from the top position. And I also think he's going to be the sharper striker on the feet. I think he has more variety on the feet than Trevin Giles, who mainly just kickboxes. Mainly just boxes. He doesn't throw a lot of kicks. But I think Malott has more power. I think Malott can get pieced up with the jab. If you remember, the jab of, I believe it was Adam Fugit, was kind of catching Mike Malott a lot in their fight. And, he seems to have an issue with jabs. And coincidentally, Trevin Giles has one of the best jabs in the division. If Trevin Giles was more durable, I would probably lean towards him. But I just can't trust his durability. And I've seen him also get submitted a bunch to where I think Malott can change levels, get a takedown, work from the top position, and ground and pound his way into a submission. Or hurt him, cause Giles to panic wrestle, and lock him up in a guillotine and submit him that way. Malott is a very well-rounded guy. I don't think he's a top-level welterweight, but I think he can get past a guy like Trevin Giles. I think Giles is probably a little bit faster on the feet. He's got a way better jab. He's going to want to stick behind that and try to piece him up with that and follow up with his right hand. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think Malott's going to find his way in. I think he's going to hurt Giles on the feet, drop him. Giles is going to get back up to his feet or panic wrestle to try to survive. I think he's going to get locked up in a guillotine choke, and I think he's going to get submitted. Give me proper Mike Malott to defeat Trevin Giles via 2nd-round guillotine choke submission. It might be 1st round, but I think he rocks him, drops him, catches him on a takedown attempt, and submits him. So I think this is a way to get Malott back on track, and I think that's what they're planning on doing here. So give me Mike Malott, 2nd-round guillotine choke submission over Trevin Giles. I just don't like his durability, And once he gets hurt, he's not a guy who seems like he's able to come back. He's one of those guys where, you have guys where they can get hurt 3, 4, 5 times in a fight and find their way to come back. Once Giles gets hurt, it's pretty much just all downhill for him at that point. So give me give me Mike Malott, proper Mike Malott, to get a win in his hometown via, I'll go first round. Give me first round guillotine choke submission. Hurts him, catches his neck, and subs him. Next up, we have a battle in the middleweight division between the power bar, Marc-Andre Barriault, taking on Dustin Stoltzfus. Listen, man, Stoltzfus has proven me wrong. I was pretty heavy on Punahele Soriano to get a knockout over Stoltzfus, and it didn't happen. Stoltzfus survived, got a takedown, took his back, and rear naked choked him. That was kind of the downfall of Soriano, but he came back with a win, and we'll see where he goes from there. I picked Abus Magomedov to knock out Dustin Stoltzfus. I think that KO was plus 250, and he front kicked him and then uppercutted him into oblivion. We've seen him kind of have a little bit of competition, or be competitive, I guess, on the feet against Bruno Ferrero, which again kind of pushed me towards the side of Abus Magomedov this past weekend, and he got the job done. Stoltzfus can strike, but I don't think he's going to be able to strike with a guy like Barriault. Barriault has a good jab, a good 1-2. He's got so much volume that I think it's just going to force panic takedowns against Stoltzfus, or panic takedowns out of Dustin Stoltzfus. And even if he gets takedowns, I know Stoltzfus is a really solid grappler, but I don't think he's going to be able to submit Marc-Andre. The only guy who's been able to submit him was Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, and we saw what Hernandez just did to Michel Pereira. Stoltzfus is not the level of grappler or wrestler as an Anthony Hernandez. He's got good submissions. He has decent takedowns, but I don't think he's going to be able to do what Fluffy Hernandez did, because not a lot of people are. And when the fight's on the feet, I think Marc-Andre is going to be coming forward. He's going to be landing big shots. He's going to be pumping that jab. He's going to be putting combinations together. I do worry a little bit because he's coming off that vicious knockout to Joe Pyfer. That was back at UFC 303 in June. So July, August, September, October. 4 months after a vicious knockout like that, I don't think is the best idea. That does worry me a little bit, but I don't think Stoltzfus has the power to knock out Marc-Andre. Maybe he can rock him, but I don't even think he can rock him. Stoltzfus is not known as a striker. He has decent striking, but the majority is wrestling, chain wrestling, going for submissions, and I think eventually Marc-Andre is just going to slow down Stoltzfus. I think he's going to be on that front foot, pumping the jab, landing the 1-2s. I think he's going to stop a lot of the wrestling, which is going to slow down Stoltzfus over the 15 minutes. And I think he's going to slow cook him into a late TKO, a late second, mid-third round TKO. This is a fight where I see the pressure of Marc-Andre slowing down a guy like Stoltzfus. I see him avoiding the submission attempts. If he gets taken down, I see him working his way back up to the feet. I don't see Stoltzfus being able to hurt a guy like Barriault on the feet. And I think the jabs, the outputs, the overall boxing and kickboxing, the clinch work of Marc-Andre up against the fence, I think it's going to slow down Stoltzfus and eventually just break him down. I think it's going to be a attritional finish, a death by 1,000 cuts finish for Marc-Andre. Would I be surprised if it goes to a decision? No. I don't think a lot of people would. Both of these guys tend to, Stoltzfus tends to get finished, but he can get finishes as well. And Marc-Andre almost gets finishes. Sometimes he does, but eventually, they find a way to make it to the distance. But I don't think Stoltzfus is going to be able to last with the volume and output of a Marc-Andre Barriault. But how do we know how he's going to look in this fight? He might come into this fight and not look as good as we think he's going to look because of him being a little gun-shy after that vicious knockout he suffered from Joe Pyfer. But I don't think that's going to be the case against a guy like Stoltzfus. I think he's going to be defensively responsible, but I think he's still going to be on that front foot. I think he'll be able to work his way back up to the feet if he gets taken down. I think he's going to have good takedown defense because he knows that's what Stoltzfus is going to do. So I think he's going to be well prepared for it. And I think he's going to start pumping that jab, start putting the boxing combinations together, get in the clinch, knees, elbows, uppercuts, and just break Stoltzfus down. I'm going to go with a third round TKO for Marc-Andre Barriault in his hometown of Canada. I think he gets a finish in his hometown. So give me Marc-Andre Barriault, the power bar, to get a third round TKO over Dustin Stoltzfus here. I think he gets the job done and looks good doing so. Up next, we got a battle in the heavyweight division between Derek the Black Beast Lewis taking on Jonathan Diniz. This is a good heavyweight fight. This one is actually interesting. I think both guys are live to get a knockout. I think the smart thing for Lewis to do would be to change levels and try to take down Jourdain Diniz, because the one thing you don't want is Derek Lewis on top of you, landing heavy ground and pound. And that's pretty much what he's going to look to do. I mean, he's going to want to get on top of Jourdain Diniz and expose the holes that we saw in his last fight. I mean, he almost lost in the third round in his last fight as an underdog, and somehow he was able to survive and then win via decision after he probably should have knocked his opponent out. But I think Derek Lewis can change levels and take down Diniz. I think he can get on top of him and land big ground and pound. And he's always live to knock him out on the feet. The problem with Derek Lewis is, although he's fought the much better competition and he probably should get a knockout here, I don't have any faith in Derek Lewis. You know, we never know what type of Derek Lewis is going to show up. We've seen him come back from adversity, and then we've seen in other fights where once he started getting hit, he kind of just balled up or packed up his bag and went home, so to speak. I think Diniz is the much better technical striker. I think he has better output. I think he has better combinations. And I think the bigger power is on the side of Derek Lewis, the man who has the most knockouts in heavyweight history. I mean, it's just as simple as that. It's going to be the fact of, can Lewis land a big shot on Diniz's chin and put him down? Definitely live to do so. And if Lewis wins, it's probably be a knockout. Or will he take the smart approach and try to take down Diniz, push him against the fence, get on top? And once he gets on top of Diniz, I think the fight's pretty much over. I'm going to side with Jourdain Diniz, though, because I just don't have faith in Derek Lewis at this point. I love Derek Lewis. I've always been a fan of his. He's always live for a crazy knockout. But I just don't have faith in his overall game anymore. I don't have faith in his love for MMA anymore. And Diniz is new to MMA. He's trying to make a statement in the UFC. And I think it comes down to the fact that Diniz is much hungrier than Derek Lewis. It's no disrespect. Like I said, I love Derek Lewis as a fighter. But I think Diniz is hungrier. I think Diniz is going to come into this fight looking to make a statement. And I don't expect Derek Lewis to use takedowns. If he does, he probably wins the fight easy via ground and pound TKO. But I think it stays on the feet. I think Diniz avoids the big power of Derek Lewis, and I think Diniz starts to kind of piece him up, land combinations, and eventually gets a knockout in the second round. I'm going to go Jourdain Diniz to get a second-round TKO victory over Derek the Black Beast Lewis. I just think he's the cleaner striker. He has better volume, better output. He picks his shots better. He knows how to, I guess, pace himself a little bit better than Derek Lewis. And like I said, once Derek Lewis starts to get hit at this point in his career, he kind of tends to just shell up and go home. But the smart thing would be to change levels, get takedowns, and if it gets to the ground, Lewis is going to kill him from the top position. I just don't have any faith in Derek Lewis at this point, kind of like the fight we broke down earlier where I said I didn't have faith in the one side to be able to get done what he needed to get done. So I'm going to take Jourdain Diniz via second-round TKO over Derek the Black Beast Lewis in this one. Now we are at the co-main event of the evening in the women's flyweight division between Rose Namajunas and Aaron Cold-Blooded Blanchfield. 12-2 on the side of Blanchfield, 14-6 on the side of Thug Rose Namajunas. I think this is going to be a great fight. Man, I think that Aaron Blanchfield can definitely be competitive with Namajunas on the feet. I think she's going to be the better grappler. Well, I'll say I think she's the better wrestler, but I don't necessarily think she's going to have an easy time holding down Rose Namajunas. I know Namajunas got taken down by Manon Fiorot at certain points and kind of got out-muscled. But I think I think Manon is much stronger than Blanchfield. But I do like Blanchfield's overall striking. She switches stances between orthodox and southpaw. She throws good 1-2s. She can finish her combinations with high kicks. But I just don't think she's on the level of a Namajunas when it comes to the striking game on the feet. The smart thing would be to use some strikes to close the distance, change levels, get takedowns, and then work from the top position. Because I do think Blanchfield is a problem for Namajunas from the top position, but I think Namajunas' defensive jiu-jitsu and her ability to work her way back up, work for sweeps, look for submissions off of her back, I think she'll be able to work her way back up. And I think this mainly becomes, how many takedowns does Blanchfield get? How long is she able to hold down Namajunas? And when the fight's on the feet, how does the striking exchanges between the two go? I think Namajunas outstrikes Blanchfield. I believe she's going to have the quicker strikes. I think she's going to be able to outland Blanchfield, keep her at range, keep her at distance, and kind of just poke her for the majority of the fight. There's not a lot of people in this division that I believe can outstrike Namajunas. But there are some people who probably can outpower her. That's kind of going to be the approach that Blanchfield's going to have to take. Jab, 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 hook, cross, switch stance, left hook, low kick, jab, change levels, pushing Rose Namajunas up against the cage. I kind of feel like she has to take the approach that she took in the Tyler Santos fight, where she changed levels, and even though she didn't get a ton of takedowns, she used a lot of cage pushing Namajunas up against the cage, landing knees to the thigh, landing knees to the body, landing elbows over the top, change levels, go back up top. She's going to have to make this a dirty and nasty fight, but with the range control, the footwork, and the movement of Namajunas, her ability to manage range and land counters, I think it's going to be a little bit too much for Erin Blanchfield. She gets hit a lot. She got hit a lot by Manon Fiorot. Fiorot was able to tag up Namajunas as well, but I think Namajunas had a little bit more of a competitive showing against Manon than Blanchfield did, even though the Blanchfield fight was 5 rounds and the Manon fight with Rose was 3 rounds. Now she's used to the flyweight division. That was her first fight at 125 against Manon, and I think she's more accustomed to fighting at this weight class now. I think she's the sharper striker on the feet. I think she's going to be able to land on Blanchfield as Blanchfield tries to close the distance. I think Blanchfield will get a couple takedowns, but I do believe Namajunas will be able to sweep or work her way back up to the feet. I think Blanchfield can be taken down in her own right. I think Namajunas can get some takedowns of her own and probably control Blanchfield from the top position for the majority of the fight. But I think Namajunas is going to be sharper. I think she's going to be competitive in the wrestling, and I don't think Blanchfield is going to hold her down long enough to be able to do sustained damage or potentially lock up a submission. I do not think Blanchfield's going to be able to submit Namajunas, because the last time we saw Namajunas get submitted was in the tough finale against Carla Esparza. I think Blanchfield might have the tools to get that done, but I don't expect Blanchfield to be able to submit Rose, and if she's not submitting her, I don't think she can control her for long enough to be able to outshine the volume and the striking output of Namajunas on the feet. So I am going to go with the underdog. I am going to go with Thug Rose Namajunas to win this fight via a 29-28 unanimous decision and probably fight Alexa Grasso in her next fight. And Grasso versus Namajunas would be a phenomenal matchup. It's a matchup I've actually looked forward to for a very long time. But give me Thug Rose. Give me Rose Namajunas, 29-28 unanimous decision. All right, and now we are at the main event of the evening in the UFC's flyweight division between the former champion and Brandon the Assassin Baby Moreno taking on Amir the Prince Albazi. 17-1 on the side of Albazi, 21-6-2 on the side of the former champion in Moreno. This is a good main event. I don't think a lot of people are going to be too excited about it, but lately the flyweight main events have been delivering, and I don't see any reason that this fight won't deliver. Moreno looked gun-shy in his last fight. He didn't really pull the trigger. He didn't look like he was trying to win that fight as much as we would have expected. And Brandon Royval came through as a huge underdog and won that fight via decision. And then, Royval just came out and beat Tatsuro Taira via decision. It was a close decision in the Taira fight, not so close in the Moreno fight. It was a split decision, I believe, but I think a lot of people thought that Royval won that fight. He outstruck Moreno. He landed good calf kicks, good leg kicks. He was beating up the leg. He was outlanding him in the striking. He showcased good takedown defense. But Moreno just didn't look like his normal self. It looked like he started to kind of digress and start to regress a little bit than what we're used to seeing. What we're used to seeing is a very active lead hand, a good jab, a good lead left hook, a good 1-2, and a really good left kick to the body. He throws it up to the head as well. He's a very lead side active fighter. Amir Albazi, we don't really know too much. A lot of people thought that he lost that fight to Kai Kara France via decision. A lot of people thought that he lost that fight and they gave him the split decision. I was on the side of Kai Kara France in that fight, so I wasn't necessarily happy with the decision. A lot of the media members thought that Kai Kara France did enough to win, but they gave it to Amir Albazi. Albazi's a good fighter. He uses a good jab. He keeps a good high guard. He moves around the octagon pretty well. He throws a good uppercut. We saw him knock out Alessandro Costa with that shot. Right up the middle. Boom. Catch him with an uppercut. He's got a good 1-2. I think that Albazi definitely has the opportunity to hurt Moreno in this fight. We saw Moreno get dropped by Pantoja, but Pantoja is currently the best flyweight in the world. We've seen Moreno get hurt. We've seen him get wobbled. And I think Albazi has the power to have the bigger moments in this fight, the bigger crowd-stealing moments. Maybe he lands a big left hook and cuts Moreno's eye. Maybe he lands a big uppercut that drops Moreno, but Moreno recovers, shoots a takedown, and gets to the top position. You know, if you look at this fight statistically, everything should point you towards the side of Moreno. Equal takedowns, almost 1.71 takedowns to 1.171. 46% takedown accuracy for Moreno. 63% takedown defense, while Albazi only has a 40% takedown defense rate. If you look at the striking, 3.87 landed per minute for Moreno, 2.8 landed for Albazi. Hold on one second. You've got a 44% significant strike accuracy rate for Moreno to 39 for Albazi. Moreno takes a little bit more, 3.63 to 3.07, but pretty close. And the defense is higher on the side of Amir Albazi. I think this fight's going to be close. I think more often than not, this fight is going to go to a decision. And this is a fight where if Moreno had a better performance against Royval in his last fight, I might be a little bit more eager to pick Moreno. But I don't want to just not pick him because of his last performance. But it's kind of a what have you done for me lately sport. And we haven't seen Albazi in over a year. You know, we don't know what he's going to look like. We don't know what the improvements are, but we know that he's coming off a pretty significant injury. An injury that could have ended his career. You know, and I know Moreno's going to come in. He's going to look hungry. He's going to want to win this fight. I think this fight is very close. I think this fight is going to play out 50-50. Not that I don't think Moreno is the better fighter, because deep down I believe Moreno to have the better skills. I believe him to be the better overall mixed martial artist, and he's definitely fought the higher level of competition. But I think with the way Albazi fights, he's got good takedown defense. He's got good takedowns of his own. He's got a lot of power. He doesn't necessarily overthrow his combinations to where he's just going to get clipped every time he walks in. He's got good defense. Like I said, if you look at his significant strike defense, it's a 63%. Like, the guy doesn't get hit very often. And I think this is going to be a very close fight where Albazi gets some takedowns, Moreno works back up. There's a couple scrambles where Albazi wins the top position, Moreno wins the top position. I think Moreno's jab and the lead left hook is going to work very well for him in this fight. I think Moreno is going to land some good combinations. Albazi's going to come back and land some good combos. I think this fight's going to be very close. I think it's going to play out kind of 50-50. And I think a lot of people are just picking Moreno because of his name, because of the success that he's had in the UFC. But honestly, I'm going to side with the underdog. I'm going to take Amir Albazi. Like I said, I think it's going to be close. I think there's going to be some people who disagree with the decision, some people who agree with the decision, and it's going to be a very competitive fight. Scrambles, takedowns on both sides, submission attempts on both sides. But I think the bigger moments, the more damaging moments, are going to come from Amir Albazi, and I think he's going to squeak by with a split decision. So give me the Prince, Amir Albazi, as the underdog to win this fight via a 48-47 split decision. I think he's going to get the job done here. I think it's going to be close, but I think the bigger moments, the bigger fight-impacting moments are going to come from the side of Amir Albazi. So I'm taking the Prince, Amir Albazi, to win the main event via a split decision. All right, that's it for my UFC Edmonton preview, predictions, and breakdown. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and lock up an anaconda choke on the notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads from the premier mixed martial arts and pro wrestling channel on YouTube. I'm your host, Double M, and I'm out.